Advanced TV Herstory, the podcast that brings you fresh perspective on the importance of TV in our lives. We tell stories of leadership, persistence, and achievement of TV women, because in the lives of women, no other media platform has influenced or inspired so many. Lo, these 60 years. Women of all ages have been impacted by what they've seen and will see on TV. So join us for a little advanced TV Herstory by streaming it directly on our website, tvherstory.com, or anywhere you find podcasts. I'm your host, Cynthia Bemis Abrams. Shondaland, loyal listeners. It's a place on TV, past, present, and future, where people of all walks, colors, and preferences see themselves. Shondaland is a mirror of us, how we see ourselves. We're smart, we're well-dressed, and we're all accepted. Going back now 13 years, Grey's Anatomy, How to Get Away with Murder, and Scandal were the first series from what would be known as Shondaland. And since, as of this recording, Ms. Shonda Rhimes is 48 years old, we're all assuming there will be much more where that came from. Where is the source of Shondaland's originality? Well, it comes from between the ears of this very talented woman, whose imagination is rich. She likes to tell a good story, and indeed of her own embrace of leadership principles and life principles that helped her find greater success and fulfillment. Listeners, this episode of Advanced TV Herstory isn't about any single series or episode produced by Shonda Rhimes, the award-winning showrunner, writer, and human being. It's a look into her 2015 book, A Year of Yes, and its lessons. Timeless, really important and applicable lessons for folks from all walks of life, from all industries. She lays out the way to prepare to transition to that next better you. Because think about how many times your life has changed, or you changed your life even, and you didn't pause to reflect, and you didn't have anyone to tell about it. You just did it, and it was a good lesson learned, right? But did you preserve it? Did you hand it down? Or did it just vanish? Well, this installment of Advanced TV Herstory recycles and adds a little glitter to Shonda Rhimes, the leader, and all the cool lessons she shared with us in this one book. Shonda's word is why this podcast even exists, because it's easier and a lot more fun to talk about leadership issues or encourage persistence in feminism when there's a TV tie-in or a relatable context, such as the stories she tells. And I'm an adjunct professor in leadership, so I recognize a good lesson that makes it much easier to grasp some of these complicated, or at least theoretical, conversations when there's something to hang it on. Year of Yes. Perhaps you read it when it first came out. Maybe you were busy, like I was. Listen to what I have to say and then read it or reread it with a greater focus on her words. I'm pretty sure I won't spoil anything, so please keep listening. Because if you've listened to any other episodes of Advanced TV Herstory, you've figured out that we love to tell the stories that inspire us to be better feminists, smarter team builders, and stronger leaders. Leaders? I'm not a leader, you say. I can hear you. Yes, I can hear you. It's a two-way microphone here. But you know what? That's probably how Shonda would have responded when she first started experiencing success as a TV writer. Unlike so many biographies, memoirs, and autobiographies of TV women, A Year of Yes relates to you and me. This candid look at a woman's transformation. Shonda Rhimes, Year of Yes, Work and Home Life Boundaries. Listeners, this is Shonda giving us her how-to on tackling the boundary issue. You know, managing the boundary between work and home life. Work being a phone that never stops delivering notifications, and her home life. 3 kids, all still very much dependent on their single mom. When she gives advice, it's the real thing. Unlike other celebrity authors, she admits her shortcomings and even her impatience or fraying nerves. She's human. We know and love her TV characters for their authenticity, and of course, it comes from this voice. So in other memoirs, famous people love to talk about their family and often gloss over the challenges and the choices and the realities that they've faced, which are probably the better stories. Because as famous people, they've had kids and they've had relationships and they've had multiple marriages. We don't expect perfection. We don't want a Photoshopped life. So if you're a loyal listener, you know my strong feelings on this. I'm a broken record. Why even attempt a less than transparent approach to sharing your life story in this internet age? Privacy is important. I'll give anybody that. So no, I'm not looking for a tell-all, but I am looking for a tell, not a tell nothing. And you know what those books are. You've read them. So Shonda wrote of this frenetic pace that used to follow her home from work. She really disliked it. Once she had 3 kids and certain home responsibility, namely parenting, and the fulfillment she desired with it. These life commitments that couldn't, or she felt shouldn't, be offloaded onto paid staff. She questioned her ability to commit to motherhood. You know that moment, right? She examined her priorities. She stacked them all up. And she ultimately, she'll be the first to tell you, she'll tell you the story of how she came to turning off her phone once the clock struck a certain hour, and how she put a notice in her email signature stating that she doesn't respond to evening emails. Now, she is the boss, it's true, of her organization, of Shondaland. But is it risky? Yes, even when you're the boss. Is it difficult to do? Well, I advise you to read the book and make that judgment yourself. But here's how she justified it. Quote, I actually stop answering emails that arrive after 7 p.m. I have to turn off my phone to do it. But I do it. I have incredibly expert people working for me to run our sets. Learning to step back and let these people have the pleasure of doing their jobs without my peering over their shoulders has been great for them and me both. And you'll find that on page 128. Now, is that Shonda the leader or Shonda the mother talking? I'd say in this instance, it's both. This is an important lesson that she shared, it seems to me, because this is about control. And she had been used to control, as many people are, as they are assuming greater responsibility in whatever their pursuit. Command and control is the old model of leadership, the one we see in TV and movies from the 60s and 70s. One person, usually a man, at the top, barking orders, telling everyone what to do, as though the world would stop, or did stop, when he left for the day. You can see it, gray suit, white shirt, wife at home whose world only started when he walked through the door, where he would then have command and control. Now, it is a big step to learn how to delegate, to truly delegate, to trust someone to do the job that they were hired to do, to trust that they've been trained, that they know it is expected of them, and that they won't let you down. And this is true for somebody who works for you, or in fact, a teenager who is taking the car for the first time. The only way a leader can be freed up to focus on the more strategic aspects of the organization, whether that's a team at work or even a family, is through fully putting all of those resources to use. Feeling confident to delegate means you're confident that you've laid the groundwork for another person's success. That might seem really obvious, but when you think about control freaks, you know them, you might also see them as self-centered. Their larger focus is on their own success or image, not on achieving the goal. That applies to control freaks in all environments, at work, at home, in your circle. The person who is so busy and loves to tell you or post accordingly. Okay, back to Shonda. Shonda Rhimes, Year of Yes, Humility Amongst Privilege. So on this whole turning the phone off thing, it's Shonda the mother talking as well, because she recounted through the book her admiration for her own parents' commitment to parenting and family. She wrote about the relationships with her siblings. And when she admitted openly that she's a highly competitive person, it only follows that she's taken a lifetime of notes and is bent on getting this parenting thing right. So she writes in the book about her resources, which she admits are more plentiful than most readers have at their disposal. But her candor is humble, her privilege acknowledged. If you had the occasion to read Sheryl Sandberg's first book, Lean In, you know how important acknowledging one's status is. Shonda has a lot of experience thinking about her audience, seeing them as the diverse, smart, daily living human beings that they are. Sheryl Sandberg, perhaps with good intentions, thought she was onto something too when she wrote about the help she had caring for her kids when she traveled or when she was working at Google or later Facebook, or about the connections she had in hand when she graduated from business school and a year later is chief of staff for the U.S. Secretary of the Treasury, because he became Sheryl's mentor when she was at Harvard. It's okay to exhale, listeners. That wasn't Shonda's path. And yes, Shonda too graduated from an Ivy League school, but she knows how to tell her story, and that story gives you an appreciation of her life lessons. You see her differently. This humility thing, that's the only word I can use. And you know, here we are living in a world where we are all trying to be inclusive, to look past labels and accept people for who they are. That is a repositioning that's going to take some time for some of us, longer in the tooth, to do. And as I've been known to say, getting used to this whole inclusion thing, I have come to not judge a woman by her china pattern or the number of goats in her front yard, but rather to look instead at the manners and the company she keeps and how she treats people. So let me pause that Sheryl Sandberg would be a lot more believable and inspirational if she walked away from Silicon Valley and invested her money in women, or maybe stayed there and invested her money in women. And if she's doing so right now, boy, I hope she's going to tell us soon. I'm old enough to remember, now this is a switch, I'm old enough to remember watching Martha Stewart every Saturday morning. That was training for something. I'm not sure what. It was pre-Pinterest. And I subscribed to her magazine. And then she got convicted of insider trading, and Martha Stewart did hard time in prison, like she wore an orange jumpsuit. And she was given a sentence that no man had had thrown at them, at least no man of that stature. But you know what? She came back better. Martha is the Madonna of the older half of the baby boom, and she's come back better and more real than ever. And I have to give her credit, because when Martha and Snoop's potluck dinner happens to be on VH1 and I'm surfing cable, I stop dead in my tracks. Martha and Snoop's potluck dinner. She has found this new audience, and the crew and the people who are delivering this show to VH1, well, go look at the IMDb page because you will see inclusion. My point is very simple. Know your audience. And this is Shonda's most important lesson, because this isn't Martha's heyday of 2000 anymore, and we have Pinterest. At 76, yes, that's how old Martha Stewart is, Martha has figured that out, and she's finding this new audience with Snoop, and it's an audience with which she can let down a little bit and unravel and use that wit that has been suppressed far too long. Martha is 4 years younger than Jane Fonda. Wow. I mean, these women are truly leading us to that next page where even white women can be inclusive. So yes, we have Shonda, who has never been anything but authentic. And we have Martha, who continues to evolve. And then we have Sheryl Sandberg, who desperately wants to appear relatable and normal, but tends to wander into her own section at the Gwyneth Paltrow Goop store, jade eggs and all. It just doesn't matter what fancy college you went to. We are all in this together. Which is why, back to Shonda, some people are able to be real about their own life challenges, like how large they are. Shonda Rhimes' Year of Yes. Weight, like pounds. Size, shape. Remember when I talked about humility and knowing your audience? Shonda got very real in the book with her humility when, like a friend sitting at the kitchen table, she wrote the story leading up to a decision that it was time for her to lose weight. Really, it's a story most people would rather die than share in public. Maybe they would share it at their kitchen table. But there she was. Shonda's star was rising. She was managing her home life better and starting to accept invitations to speak on her way to becoming the force that we know her to be today. Shondaland was already becoming a thing, and she was seated in first class on one of these trips. First class, free drinks, generous seats. And she was unable to fasten the seatbelt. Now, when I teach leadership, I share a formula I learned in my master's program that I have used and taught time and again. It's called the Beckhardt-Harris change model and describes the conditions that have to be present in a situation in order for resistance to ease and change to actually happen. There needs to be dissatisfaction with the status quo, which is usually the tipping point. That has to be accelerated by a vision of what the future is, which might be a plan or the desired happy place, and the first step. So think of it as the vision and the first step are the collective homework or the thinking, sometimes that has to be done in advance while you're waiting for that dissatisfaction point to happen, that these things together allow the transition to be considered as change instead of chaos. So in her own way, Shonda shared her version of the Beckhardt-Harris change model with this insight. From page 157. Here's Shonda. Quote, "Are you ready? Here's how you know if you're ready or not. 3 years ago, if someone had said something to me like, 'Nothing works until you're ready for it to work,' I would have force-fed them butter until they weighed 1,000 pounds. Everything sounds like crap until you are in the right mindset." End quote. Loyal listeners, rest assured, I'll include the Beckhardt-Harris change model in the show notes, because this whole notion that resistance is overcome when dissatisfaction and vision and first step line up real nice, it's a total game changer. It will change how you look at things. Shonda Rhimes, Year of Yes. It's a hashtag new day. 3 years after its publication, this book is more relevant than ever. Her candid chronicle and eloquent self-awareness that she delivered in speeches and shares in the book, and that helps put into context 2 hashtag movements of our time, Me Too and Time's Up. But she did these speeches many, many years before. Shonda, the red-blooded American woman of Hollywood, shared in her book the full text of her acceptance speech for an award presented to her by the Hollywood Reporter Women in Entertainment, folks, a speech entitled On Ceilings Made of Glass. And here's her quote. "Look around this room. It's filled with women of all colors in Hollywood who are executives and heads of studios and VPs and show creators and directors. There are a lot of women in Hollywood in this room who have the game-changing ability to say yes or no to something. 15 years ago, that would not have been as true. There'd have been a few women in Hollywood who could say yes or no, and a lot of D girls and assistants who were gritting their teeth and working really hard. And for someone like me, if I was very, very, very lucky, there'd maybe have been one small show. One small shot. And that shot would not have involved a leading actress of color, any 3-dimensional LGBT characters, any women characters with high-powered jobs and families, and no more than 2 characters of color in any scene at one time, because that only happened in sitcoms." End quote. Shonda's presence in TV has brought us to where we are today. Some, yearning for the old America, want to close the doors that she has mightily tended to these 12+ years. So think about it, listeners. We need to join her in keeping that door open and indeed finding other ways to let in fresh, inclusive air. So in the book, Shonda continues with her speech. This is page 171, quote, 50 years ago, trying to get out of separate rooms, 30 years ago, trying to not serve breakfast or be groped by their bosses, 15 years ago, trying to make clear that they could run a department as well as that guy over there. All the women, white or black or brown, who woke up like this, who came before me in this town, think of them. Heads up, eye on the target, running full speed, gravity be damned, toward that thick layer of glass that is the ceiling. She goes on to write, successful women, when receiving public praise, will react in one of three ways. And then she shook her head and she looked away. They shake their heads and they look away, waving off the words. They duck their heads and they look embarrassed. Or they cover their face because they don't want attention. And then she goes on to write that the editor-in-chief of The Hollywood Reporter started engaging her in small talk after her speech. And Shonda, still reeling from what she had witnessed throughout this entire gala, rubber chicken dinner, lunch thing, responded with, hey, did you notice that not a single woman in this room can handle being told she's awesome? What is wrong with us? Page 177. Okay, listeners, this is the essence of this podcast. We celebrate these women living and dead, behind the camera, hidden in the writer's room, doing deals to land the next pilot, whatever they are doing. But right now, my voice in your ear, we are celebrating amongst ourselves. I am preaching to you, the converted, and I've said it time and again, this gets us nowhere. So instead, I'm going to give you a quick list of some ways to march in Shonda's army, to make a difference out there in the real world, because there are ways we can continue to force change. These are real things you can do. Some of them are in person, some are on your phone, but they are definitive steps that you can take to make the world a better place, a more welcoming place for women. We're doing it because you read Shonda relating all of this, or you heard me say it just now, and you've nodded your head. We are together, and you know what we need to do. So first up, as film goes, so goes TV. We cannot be beholden to contrived boundaries like media platforms. When a new film by a woman premieres, see it on opening weekend. Make that box office count. 2. Time to toughen up our online commenting game. When a white male entertainment columnist, you know them, or a reviewer disses something that you've seen or misses a really important point, it's time to write a comment. Yes, be brave and just do it. If you're worried about trolls, oh goodness, have a few friends at the ready to support you. But you know what? It's 2018 and trolls are getting shouted down now more than ever before. And more importantly, it's time to tell those reviewers, those people who work for the media organization whose words are influential, that their perspectives are a bit myopic, and then send that same message to the editor. 3. If Netflix is on the fence or acting up on pay equity, as headlines have shown lately, tweet them, and then watch women-oriented, women-centric shows in spades. And maybe just let those shows run throughout the day on your Netflix account, because your Netflix account has an odometer, which is a more accurate depiction of a show's popularity than Nielsen ratings in the broadcast world, the regular broadcast world, are. So every time you watch a Netflix Grace and Frankie, the little number has a hash. 4. I'm just going to say it, tweet in general. Tweet to writers of series with praise. Tweet that you've been loving the lines on 911 on Fox that those writers give Angela Bassett, because 911 on Fox is really one of my favorite shows these days. But make some noise that is about you, the viewer, and it's from you, the viewer, and that these are your words, not the Twitter equivalent of a form letter. That's how shows are going to be saved now and in the future. That's this direct, unfiltered, unmonitored account into writers' rooms and producers and directors. Number 5, listen to this podcast and share it, please. Please recommend it to others who are still discovering the significance of representation and celebrating women. Geez, it's so foreign to us to praise women, that I'm hopeful that this podcast reminds you that you're part of the answer. You're part of Shonda's army. And why, yes, this podcast needs more listeners. So it's time to bring your dear Aunt Margaret into the 21st century. Have her join Shonda's army. We don't expect her to be on Twitter, but you know what? I think she probably talks to a lot of women, and they need to be reminded of just how united we are. Shonda Rhimes, Year of Yes, Swagger. Okay, now around page 198, she quotes the dictionary definition of swagger as a state of being that involves loving oneself, waking up, quote, like this, and not giving a crap what anyone else thinks about you. And as we've noted in past podcast episodes, it's about having the presence of Cher or Angela Bassett. Swagger, self-confidence, badassery, which has now become a word. And as she writes on page 201 about badassery, she says, badassery, I'm discovering, is a new level of confidence in both yourself and those around you. I now feel like I can see so many amazing things about myself and the people around me. And then she goes on to write that she actually wrote, I want to take over the world through television. I said it jokingly, but I wasn't joking. I was never joking. Think about that, listeners. Think for a moment. I want to take over the world through television. We're talking about impact here. Transformational storytelling, no detail overlooked, and no slice of American humanity overlooked by the storyteller. That's powerful. In this podcast, I end up talking a lot about the importance of representation. It's so important. It calls for a new and special word, one word that women in particular can understand and appreciate and embrace so that we know what we're talking about the minute we see it or that we don't see it. So again, going back, and this is just to create one more example of the feeling so that you can tell Aunt Margaret what it is that she's missing in her life and why she needs to demand more of it. Take that older part of the baby boom. That was a generation that was starved for women role models. They did not see themselves on TV or hear themselves on the radio all that often. The older ones, born, say, between 1946 and 1955, they are the ones who responded to every movement of the wheel, like every minuscule change. They were there because it was something different. And you need to only look no further than the cultural significance of Carole King's Tapestry album. It wasn't just that the talented woman delivered an album of great songs, and that was just a few years after the Supremes opened up our eyes to women performing on their own, but rather the lyrics of every song on Tapestry, written in the late 60s, have to do with living life from a woman's point of view, independent, modern, and mostly not about a man. So when you have Aunt Margaret's ear, explain representation in a way that she can understand it, whether that's Carole King or Diana Ross or any of those pioneers. Or if it's somebody who's a little younger but doesn't necessarily consider herself a feminist, put it in the women of song who she perhaps has seen in herself, that she's heard and relates in her voice, whether that's Madonna or Beyonce or Pink. And there will be something that comes from that relation that puts you on common ground and helps her understand the importance of representation. Now let's get back to Shonda, shall we? So in page 286, and this is Shonda kind of wrapping up, and I'm just pulling the very best. I really encourage you to read the book. She says this, and this is really, really important, and it ties into everything I've shared with you today. There is one rule, Shonda writes. The rule is there are no rules. Happiness comes from living as you need to, as you want to, as your inner voice tells you. Happiness comes from being who you actually are instead of who you think you are supposed to be. End quote. This is the one line of Shonda's book that is a lesson women are slow to learn. Think about it, layers and layers of consumption and living for others' expectations. If we simply live as others expect us to, then we won't be alone. This is powerful stuff, right? But we need to know that we are okay alone, that we live ourselves, that we love ourselves, that we can entertain ourselves, and that whatever we are doing is just as satisfying as, say, what others might be sharing on Facebook. So many lessons from Shonda. Timeless, wonderful lessons. Once I completed the book, I tapped my own network to find out what others thought about it. Of Lisa, an advanced TV Herstory loyal listener, who connected and said, "Yes, I've read it. I love it." I asked her for more details. So here is her contribution. How did I and others use the book's value and wisdom? She writes, I thought the book validated the fact that no one, no matter how successful, feels like they have all their stuff together. We all struggle with the balance, and it's okay. I love the way she told the story, honest with humor, providing real examples as she describes her journey. It started with the realization that she often turns down opportunities that caused her personal discomfort, but by pushing past those initial gut reactions and opening herself up to the possibility, taking risk, she was able to achieve more in her life and was happier as a result. Lisa goes on to write, I've recommended it to colleagues and friends. As you know, relationships at my large national employer cross these boundaries. We are not only colleagues, but consider one another to be good friends. We've shared our struggles to achieve the balance. I've also recommended it to personal friends. I don't think it is exclusive to those of us who work outside the home, but rather all women as we strive for better balance. Finally, she writes, one of the things I took away is to focus on what you've accomplished despite the challenges of life and often lack of balance versus beating ourselves up over the lack of perfection. Glass half full, half empty. This is so hard for many of us. And worth noting is that I listened to the audio version of the book, which she herself narrates. She's not only funny in the written word, but she has a great way of conveying the stories. I like audiobooks when I'm flying for work. Thank you so much, Lisa, for that contribution. Listeners, if you've read Year of Yes and want to get a word in edgewise, shoot me a line at advancedtvherstory@gmail.com. I'd love to include your thoughts or set up a recording for you. Shonda has given us such a great gift in this book, and she's queued up topics that we need to keep discussing amongst ourselves. And you know full well these themes and other life experiences from her very real life will find their way to the screen, rest assured. We are more isolated than ever, so after you've read Year of Yes, do what Lisa did and recommend it to someone who's looking for more perspective. And also recommend this podcast. So, other ways to get in touch with us here at Advanced TV Herstory is on Twitter. Our handle is @TV Herstory. And you can find us on Facebook at Advanced TV Herstory, a podcast. Listeners, you may know that podcasters have very little data about who you are and how you listen to this podcast. Maybe you're currently subscribing through your favorite podcatcher, an app on your Android or iPhone, like Radio Public or Overcast or Spoke. Those are all good, user-friendly apps that work on both kinds of phones. It's a chance to get away from Apple Podcasts and some of those that maybe don't work as well. There's a lot of technology out there. But if technology isn't your thing, you'll always be able to just press play on any episode you'll find at our website, tvherstory.com, on our YouTube channel, or at radiopublic.com. Many great episodes are all just one Google search away, people. So lastly, my thanks to 3 women who live by many of Shonda's best lessons. Lisa, who provided her prompt and candid impression of the book. Paula, dear friend from college who edited this script and has been a steady source of laughs and love for 30 years now. And Jen Eads, who raises this content to an audio quality that makes you think you're listening to NPR. And that music in the background is Jazzer's Take Me Higher, found at freemusicarchive.org. Finally, listeners, if you value this podcast and want to ensure that we keep producing high-quality, thought-provoking episodes, go to our website, tvherstory.com, scroll down on the homepage to the Contact section, and you'll see a box that says Become a Patron. And this takes you to a place where you can pledge a small amount each month that goes into buying services that make this podcast great and take it forward. Your support as well, these notes and your likes and your retweets, they all mean very much to me. But if you believe you're getting value from what we produce, then I welcome your financial support as well. So yes, take it from Shonda and celebrate the work of women in your life. Their work, their fearlessness, their diligence, their heart. Pay a compliment. And when you receive one, hold your head high and just say thank you. Acknowledge that someone thinks highly of you and your deeds. So listeners, thank you for listening and inspiring me to deliver a better podcast. I'm your host, Cynthia Bemis Abrams.